We'll start over again. You won't have to come to any more of these classes because we're going to take a break for a while. And Esther says, finally, there you go, finally. So I have an interesting topic for discussion in the fall that we're going to go to. Maybe we can go a little bit earlier than November, but I think after Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot and all of that. And it's a topic because it seems that mostly women come to this. So I thought that, Marvin, you can count on this too, because you come with Adele. But there's a book that was put out by Rabbi Yehuda Henkin. Rabbi Eliyahu Henkin was a giant for a generation, and his son and his grandson. I've spoken about Eitam Henkin, the rabbi who was very young in his 30s, and he was murdered with his family, his wife and children in Israel, surrounded. His car was surrounded. He was killed, and he was an upcoming genius in his own right. He wrote a book on halacha, but I've been going through it slowly. It's very interesting. But his father, because his great grandfather, I think, was Eliyahu, but his father or his grandfather was Yehuda, wrote a responsa on issues relating to the concept of women within halacha. And I thought, what an interesting topic that would be to men as well, because as you know, that women are not obligated to time-bound mitzvot, yet it seems to me that, especially in our generation, women are more and more actively involved in Torah-bound mitzvot. And his book discusses issues of old-fashioned nature, things that some of us don't follow, but it also discusses modern things that we can think about. And just to give you a short, brief idea of what I would be discussing, it starts off with something that nobody here in our community would care about, which is the idea of kol isha, but to understand where it comes from, which is the idea of men not being able to listen to a woman's voice. Like the idea comes from if a woman is singing, that a man might come to have erotic thoughts, and therefore, especially if he has seen her, it says in the early poskim said, especially if he can attribute a face to the person, it's even worse, because then he knows what the person looks like, and he's hearing the voice of the person singing, if it's an opera singer or a pop star or whatever it is. And then you might, so there's that whole concept of when is it allowed, and then they decide, the modern poskim later, well, you can do it if it's on the radio because it's nonsense, and it isn't. Anyway, all of those, but that's not what I wanted to really focus on. Was more interesting topics of this concept, which seems to be being brought up a lot, especially in conservative shuls. The Narayever shul was one of the very first shuls in Toronto that embraced an Orthodox Siddur, full davening, but women were 100% egalitarian. It was all egalitarian. Before anybody even had that concept in the city, nobody even thought of it. And they made a policy, and it was on the walls when you came into the shul, because I had been there for B'nai Mitzvahs, that basically women, in this shul, women wear head coverings, all women. And I think talitot too. Am I right, Esther? I'm not sure, but.
Talitot if you're on the bima doing something, otherwise you don't have to.
Well, that's interesting. Okay.
So whoever does anything on the bima, they give you one if you don't have. But you have to have it on the bima.
So interesting. So the talitot would be less of an issue for me, because I don't believe that women are obligated. That's a whole idea we can talk about for tzitzit. Like, for instance, when I wake up in the morning, so I put on tzitzit. I wear them under my shirt. I wear tzitzit all day long, most of the time. Some are hot summer day. Maybe I'm not wearing them from cutting the grass or something. But generally speaking, I'll put them on as a reminder that I'm a Jew. But I find that women are not obligated to wear that garment of four corners of tzitzit. But if you want to accept that, or tefillin, you can. But I was thinking more of the issues of, I'll give you an idea, and then we'll talk more about the fast again, just because it's an interesting idea. the idea of separation, and not nida, but the separation of a mechitza, of putting a separation where women sit on one side and men sit on the other, and the positives and the negatives. The positive side is people don't want to really admit this, but women do enjoy women company, and men do enjoy men's company. That's one of the reasons why in the Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Quartet Singing in America, women wanted to join. They have their own organization called Sweet Adelines, and they wanted to join together with the men. And they said, no, you can do one-offs like a concert together, whatever it is, but you have to have separate organizations, because men want to be with men. They want to not just sing with men, but they want to have the camaraderie of just men, which is something I wonder how popular Boy Scouts will be in 30 years from now that they've let girls be part of Boy Scouts. I don't know where that's going to go. Remember, it was always separate brownies and brownies and cubs, guides and scouts, right? So now that it's all together and it's all one thing, I don't know how it's going to turn out. But the idea is when I sit in shul, I'm okay sitting with the men. And I don't know if the women are okay sitting with just the women on the women's side, but it seems to me that when I see in an Orthodox shul that I see that, I don't see that there's any uncomfortableness, if you want to say that. I think they like that. They go and they see their friends. You sit with your peeps. You know what I mean? Women have their peeps too, right? Men have their peeps. But what about this concept? There is nothing that says that the question was asked, and we'll hit this topic. This is an interesting question. The question was asked, a woman was disgruntled because she said, I'm inviting all of my relatives to my daughter's wedding, and the men are getting all the honors. Why can't the women have some of the honors? Well, we have a reason. A woman can't be Mesader Kiddushin, meaning do the first, the Birkat Erusin with the wine cup, because that presides over the marriage. That's the first part of it. That's the actual engagement, in a sense, because women are not allowed to be in positions of authority. Now, that's not going to sit right with any of you here. But that is the reason why we don't have women mashgichim. If you remember from my class on kashrut, we once discussed that. In one of the classes, I said a woman is not allowed to be a mashgiach. A case came before Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, where the husband of a widow, a woman, the husband passed away. He was the mashgiach in this restaurant. The wife was not affluent. She didn't have a lot of money. Her husband was a mashgiach. He made a modest living. And she said to Rabbi Feinstein, if I don't take that job and work in that restaurant and become the mashgiach and do my husband's job, my children will not have food, and I will not be able to pay for tuition for yeshiva, and we're not going to have anything to eat, and I can't pay the rent. So Moshe Feinstein was a very compassionate man. He said, okay, go and do the job, be the mashgiach. Well, the community went nuts. They went crazy. They said, absolutely not. You cannot have a woman in a position of authority. You've got to be nasty. You got to be mean. You got to tell the employees you got to be here. You can't have a relationship of friendliness with your employees if you're a mashgiach, because they'll take advantage of you. It says in the Gemara, it says in the Shulchan Aruch, it says you've got to be a person who doesn't care what anybody there thinks. And she'll be too soft, and men won't respect her and won't listen to her because she's a woman. And then they made this really nasty comment in one of the sources where they said, women are frivolous and lightheaded. Like, in other words, they're just, they're stupid people, women. So they're busy thinking about makeup and hair all day. They're not going to be good for mashgiachs. Terrible, right? This woman was a serious woman who wanted to do a job to pay for money for a thing. So now Moshe Feinstein was stuck. The people in the community said she can't be the mashgiach. He already promised her she could be. What's he going to do? So he had to find a ruling. And what he did was he said, you know what? She'll be the mashgiach. And he got into a lot of hot water over this. She'll be the mashgiach, but we'll have somebody oversee her. The council of kashrut will oversee her. So in other words, she'll watch to make sure everything's kosher, but she won't really be the actual mashgiach. She'll be the assistant to the mashgiach, who is the head of whatever it is. Anyway, it never happened again. And still to this day, at Yom Hazeh, we don't have women mashgiachs, which I think is too bad, because on a personal note, I was just had this discussion with my wife a minute ago. We were talking about how men seem to think that they're big picture thinkers, but women are much more oriented to the small details of picking up the small details, especially if you're working with data collection. Or I remember at Sears Canada, they only hired women to do the high stacking with those machines. You know, those big forklifts? They used to hire women forklift drivers only in their warehouses because they knew where every number was and every stack of where this was and where that was. A32 is the blow dryers, and B39 is the TV sets, and C24 is where the lawn tractors are. Whatever it is, they knew. They had a memory for thinking that. Just like Esther Meisels knows that page 88 says, what does page 88 say in the Siddur? It says, think clearly, you simpletons. Anyway, so it's a funny line, but she pointed it out today. I think that the concept is that we know that women today are not stupid and frivolous and lightheaded. So how does the halacha sit around this? And I'm wondering, will that change in the future? Would a detailed oriented woman be able to become a mashgiach in the next number of years? I'm curious, will they say a woman doesn't have to be called the person of authority, but can be in the person of authority? Like, we need to get past that. So going back to the story, I said a wedding happened and the woman says, I want my guests to participate. How are they going to participate? Well, she said, I want them to, why can't they do the Sheva Brachot? No, can't sing the Sheva Brachot. Kol Isha. Can't have her sing the Sheva Brachot. We have an excuse. Kol Isha. All right. How about if they just read it? They're not singing it. Why can't the woman read a bracha? Now they were stuck. They had no answer for that. So the truth is, a woman can read a Sheva bracha. It doesn't happen, but they can. And then it went even further. Why can't my sister read, they didn't say my sister, but a woman read the ketubah? Now they were stuck again, because there is no reason why a woman cannot read a ketubah, and especially if she's better at it than the man. We know this from our own shul, where women get up and they daven way better than many of the men. So how come you can't read the ketubah? You're just reading a document that says that if you get divorced, you got to pay her 150 shekels of silver. Why can't a woman read that? Do you know that there's no halacha to read a ketubah at a wedding? Ketubah is fluff. It's nonsense. It's a time filler. The idea of the ketubah is to waste time between the Birkat Erusin, the time when you do the engagement, and the actual Sheva Brachot. Because if you were to go from one to the other, it means you're engaged at 10:36 and you're married at 10:37. So they would say, we got to waste 15, 20 minutes so there's a break, because originally you got engaged way before a year, 6 months before, and then you got married. Today they do the Birkat Erusin and the Sheva Brachot at one ceremony altogether. We do the whole wedding together. So when Jewish couples say, oh, Mazel Tov, we're engaged, the frum families don't say we're engaged. They say we're having a l'chaim. They have a l'chaim. But in our world, we say engaged. Well, they're not engaged. It's really a lie, because they're not engaged until the actual chuppah, when they do the Birkat Erusin. That's the betrothal right there. So to waste time, a woman can read the ketubah. If anybody asks you that question, halachically, according to Orthodox halacha, a woman can read a ketubah. There's no reason why not. It's just reading a document. So why are they not doing it? And that's what Rav Yehuda Henkin goes into, that kind of idea of what are our responsibilities as a community to keep everybody quiet and keep everybody happy. So I'm interested in the modern Orthodox world, if that starts to become something that could be done also down the road. So in our world, in the conservative world, it's done all the time because we have women rabbis, and women rabbis do weddings all the time, and they read the ketubah, they do Birkat Erusin. We're not worried about becoming, I don't know what you want, how do you want to say it? Sexually attracted to the rabbi because she's singing a Sheva Brachas. That's not what's in your mind. You got a couple getting married. So I just think that it's going to be of great interest. Rabbi Scheim once shared a really funny joke with me one time from one of his colleagues, and then we're going to go on to fast days. And he said that one of the rabbis, one of his colleagues said to him, how do you know when it's time to retire? So he said, well, when you're first a young rabbi and you're in your late 20s and you come to a synagogue and you're doing weddings, you look and you see, oh, the bride is beautiful. He said, and then later on in life, within your career, you look at the mother of the bride and you go, the mother of the bride is beautiful. And he said, and by the time you're ready to retire, you go, you know, the grandmother is very good looking. He said, then you know you're ready to retire. So we're allowed to kibitz a little bit. So when it comes to the laws and the minhagim for fast days, we were talking about how is it a community idea? Is it a spiritual idea? And it seems to be that there's a goal in mind for the fasting. And the goal really is the idea of atonement, some kind of feeling of atonement. Most people know nothing about the fasts. It seems to be we just do it because we're told you do it. We don't really look into it because it's kind of maybe a little bit boring, you know. And in fact, one person who was quite knowledgeable mentioned to me today, says to me, oh, yeah, I said, what I'm talking about, he said to me, wait a minute, isn't Tzom Gedalia the siege of Jerusalem? And I said, no, it's not. Like, that's not what it is. And I was starting to explain a little bit about Tzom Gedalia. People really don't know because most people don't fast on those minor fasts. But when you talk about a minor fast, so in the absence of any clear indication of peace and shalom and gezerut and laws and fences around what we do, we have an obligation to try to understand why we are doing what it is we're doing. It makes it more meaningful. If you fast Yom Kippur, you know you're doing it because it's a day of atonement, and you feel the word atonement and Yom Kippur seem to go together. You hear it all the time, right? The day of atonement. So they work together, and you go, you fast because everybody fasts on Yom Kippur. It's a day of atonement. We have to repent and we bang our chest for our sins. And the fast days are like a litmus test for where we are in our area of doing tshuva. You know, like, what is our intent? Is your intent on Yom Kippur to get it over with and say, I fasted, I did it, there I was, I did what I'm supposed to do, God, give me a year of good health and blessings? Or is the intent to say, we really mean that we really want to try to do a little bit better in the next days to come? So the fast days are this test for ourselves of saying that we are trying to become in a spiritual place, I guess that's the only way I could say it, of being together in the Jewish people. So when we say the Jewish people, we mean our community. If you were the only person in the entire shul that fasted, we had a new minhag, no more fasting on Yom Kippur. We serve Kiddush afterwards. Fasting is old-fashioned. We want you to be eating and celebratory and feeling good that you can really pray because you're not hungry anymore. And you were the only one that said, I can't follow that. I'm going to fast. I'm still going to fast, but I want to come to my shul because I still like my shul. And you were the only one doing it. You'd feel weird and odd. You'd say, I'm the only one fasting and nobody else here knows what I'm feeling because they don't get it. They don't understand it. When you fast with 10 other people that you know that are fasting, at least as much as they can, or trying, then you feel that you're part of something greater. And I think that's part of the meaningfulness of fasting. So before, in the last session, we were talking about the origins of the 4 fast days. So we came up with this concept that Tisha B'Av and the other 3 fasts are all because of the misfortunes that happened on those particular days. And now we're going to take a look at some of the halachas for the minor fast. So the beginning of the fast, what happens? What do you actually do? You have to wake, if it's not a Tisha B'Av or Yom Kippur where you go to bed hungry, those are the worst. Those are the fast days we don't love. Well, some people like it because they'll look at it and say, I'm going to go to bed. It's an intermittent fast. I'm going to fast starting a little bit earlier. There's a mindset, I believe, at least for myself, I can't speak for you, but if I choose to fast because I want to fast from 9 o'clock until 9 o'clock, so 9 o'clock at night until 9 o'clock the next day, not 9 o'clock in the morning, but 9 o'clock the next day, I'm doing it because I want to do it. That's okay. But when you tell me, Marshall, you have to fast, you can't eat anything after 9 o'clock at night, nobody likes to be told you can't do something. And that changes my mindset. Now I feel restricted. What do you mean you're telling me I can't? If I want to, I won't have ice cream. But if I wanted to, now all of a sudden you're telling me it's 10 o'clock at night. If I want to have a bowl of ice cream, I can't have a bowl of ice cream because I'm fasting. When you're told you can't do something, it feels different than when you decide it for yourself. So in contrast to Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, where it doesn't begin the night before, the minor fasts are different because you can set your alarm and wake up extra early and have breakfast. Well, that's a different kind of a fast. Now, for some of us, it might be a problem because I don't eat in the morning. I like a coffee, so I can't have a coffee after a certain time. I might get up and have a coffee in the morning. That's what I'm used to. That's all I have. I don't eat usually before 1 o'clock. And I'm happy with a coffee. So if you have only that, you can wake up at whatever it is, 5 o'clock in the morning, have your coffee, feel fine. And if you're hungry, you can have toast and you can have eggs and you can have cheese and you can have chicken if you want. You can have anything you want before the time when the fast begins. Well, once it begins, it's called Alot Hasha'ar. That's dawn. That's the morning, the period of dawn when the sun is breaking. And it concludes at an expression that you'll hear often in Judaism called Seit HaKochavim, when the stars are coming out, right? We always say that in a sukkah, you have to be able to see the stars at night. Although it's so cloudy and so foggy and so smoky, if we were having sukkahs right now, you wouldn't see too many stars. But the idea that you would theoretically be able to see the stars is the idea. So the time that the stars would come out is when it's when you can start to say Shabbat ends, Yom Tov ends, the fast ends, when you see 3 stars, I think it's Tzeda Kochavim. I think it's 3 stars. So when you see 3 stars, all of a sudden now you can light the Havdalah candle, you can turn on the lights. You don't have to light the Havdalah candle right away. You can say, Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol. That's all you have to say is those 4 words, and you're allowed to that ends your Shabbat or Yom Tov, and then you can go ahead and do whatever it is you do until you decide what time you're going to say a full Havdalah. So when those 3 stars are out in the sky, our rabbis came up with this concept of a luach, a calendar, which we're supposed to check and look at and say, what is the exact time? Because we can say 3 stars, but the rabbis might say, 3 stars won't be out until, and they always have these times like 8:57. It's like what, they couldn't just say 9 o'clock, wait 3 more minutes, 9 o'clock. Now, Tzeda Kochavim, according to the Luach and according to different Rabbanim, can be different times, depending if you're talking about Shabbat ending, as opposed to what would just really be Tzeda Kochavim. So, for instance, if we follow the Yeket custom, which is if Shabbat starts at 7, because that's when it starts, it ends an hour after that, which would be ending at 8 o'clock at night. But we, meaning our community, really follows an hour and 5 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes. That's the Chabad custom, who make a lot of the calendars. They're really big into the calendar business, right? They make good calendars. So if you look at it, you might say, well, I'm going to follow an hour and 10 minutes. Why the 10 minutes is to ensure that we're not doing it too early. They will accept it if you end it and you're saying Havdalah and they're standing around you. Hasidim will accept that, because let you be the goy. You're saying it, I'm not saying it. So you've ended it for me. It's terrific. I say Amen, and terrific. It's okay. But they themselves won't say it until an hour and 20 minutes afterwards, the Hasidim, a lot of them. They wait an hour and 20 minutes. And in Borough Park, in some of the places, it's a full hour and a half afterwards. Well, I think that's a tirchat tzibur. It's a punishment on the community to say you should wait longer. And that's why some people will say to me on Saturday night when I say I'm in charge. I let Michael run the services. The shul, he's the ritual director. He should be in charge. That's his domain. But when he's on holidays, if you notice on Saturday night, we finish chick chuck on time. If Shabbos ends at 8:45, I like to be doing Havdalah at 8:45 because I think it's not fair to the people that are coming to say, I'm going to schlep it out another 20 minutes, half an hour afterwards. Maybe you want to go home and watch the news. I don't know. But whatever it is you want to do, you should be able to do it. We should end on time. But that doesn't mean that I'm right. Other people could say, what's the rush? We should be sad that Shabbat is ending. So therefore we should sit around and we should be longer and do Havdalah slowly. And what's another 20 minutes? And we should have a Malava Malka and you can sing a couple Zmiros and a couple more songs and have a good cry because Shabbos is over. And then you can be happy again on Wednesday that it's coming back again for another week. You know, there is this concept of sadness, then Shabbat ends, but happiness at the same time, that now you get to begin another week, another day of seeing something interesting in our life. So Ramban, Nachmanides is maintaining that all four of the fasts are fundamentally the same. They're all identical, and they begin the night before, and one should observe the additional stringencies, he says, regarding washing, anointing, marital relations, and wearing leather shoes. Well, that's interesting. So did you know that? No marital relationships. You know you're supposed to wear running shoes or rubber shoes or whatever it is, but a lot of people don't do that on Shivaser B'Tammuz or Aser B'Tevet or Tzom Gedalia. They might want to wear dress shoes or leather shoes. You're not supposed to. Even on those fast days, those stringencies are still supposed to apply, as well as anointing, which means putting on fancy creams and lotions and those things. Although the idea of the Shabbat restrictions don't apply, like there's a concept of memareach. Memareach means spreading lipstick. Like you shouldn't wear lipstick on a fast day, but if you were to put it on Shabbat, you're allowed to dab it on your lips and then press your lips together. You're not allowed to actually wipe and smear lipstick across your lips or eyeshadow across your eyes, because when you do that, you're smoothing, and it goes back to the 39 malachas of Shabbos, the idea of smoothing the hides. You know, when they would tan the hides, they were smoothing the hides. So you're not supposed to spread lotions and oils and fancy makeups and creams and all that chazarai. But if you were to wear leather shoes, you're also not really following the practice of our custom of a fast day. However, he says, the fasts nowadays are only reshut. Reshut means with permission or dependent. It's only dependent upon whatever the people are doing in the community, the will of the people, he says. But that means, what does your community do? What do they all do? And the people, if they accept upon themselves stringencies during the fast day, then that's one thing. But if they don't accept it in that community, then you can follow what the community does. So if this has a significance halachically, then it's suggesting that those who are able to observe the whole fast should begin the fast the night before and observe the stringency of the public fast day. We don't do that. Thank goodness. Thank goodness that the from in the community aren't saying, you know what, if Tisha B'Av starts the night before, then so should Shivaser B'Tammuz and some Gedalia and Aseret B'Tevet and we don't want, I don't want that. It makes our fast even longer. But if the community in your district said, we're going to start accepting that it's, why should it be, everything when does Shabbat start? It doesn't start Saturday morning. When does Pesach start? It doesn't start the day of Pesach. Even Hanukkah, which is post-biblical, starts the night before. We light the night before, Erev Hanukkah. We don't light on the first candle on the first night of the first day of Hanukkah. Everything has an Erev. So if there is an Erev, you could be thinking about the fast, but you can still be eating a corned beef sandwich. I like it like that. I don't want them to change that. It's been a long time since I had a corned beef sandwich. So if the fast is supposed to begin the night before, one should not abstain from wearing leather shoes, and this would be perceived as being haughty, Ramban says. Okay, showing off, being a big shot. So now we have a leniency in yeshivish, they call it being makel. They're saying, oh, we're relaxed about that. You can wear leather shoes on the minor fast because they're not as strict as the Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. So we're going to let you, we won't comment if you do. If you don't, it's okay. You want to be a little bracha panav alehem. Blessings will come upon you if you want to be a little bit more strict for yourself, but you don't have to be a nazir. You don't have to be so strict that you're going to say, I'm going to follow everything b'diuk the way it is on Yom Kippur, the way it is on another fast day. So this idea of them saying haughty means you're showing off in the community that you're more from than everybody else. That's why I don't like it, and it happens. I see it all the time, and people are allowed to do whatever they want. If they come to our shul, our minhag is at our shul that we don't put our talit over our heads during the Shemona Esrei. Many shuls in many communities, people for the Shemona Esrei and silent prayer, they take the talit, they put it over their head. It's a way of being more devoted to your prayer. If that's your personal custom that you're coming with it from your shul, and that's what you want to follow, there's nothing that says you can't do it. But I have a feeling of when in Rome, do like the Romans do. I'm not going to train them at Holy Blossom or Temple Sinai or Temple Emmanuel to follow our customs just because in our shul, we do something in our shul a certain way. And now I'm going to go there and show off to them that for Baruch Shamar, I'm going to hold my seat and kiss them. Everybody should see that. You can do that if that's your private belief, but you don't have to show off that you're more from than everybody else. Imagine if you went to a Reform temple and now you have your talit over your head. They're going to go, who's this religious person? You know what I mean? Like, it's like you're showing off how religious you are in front of the community. You don't really have to do that because there's no halacha to do it. So if there's no halacha, don't show that you're haughty by being more than everybody else. And that, by the way, goes to a lot of stringencies in halacha. A lot of things are don't be more from than the next. I struggle in kashrut with the concept of glut kosher. I was at Sobeys last week. So I'm standing in line and I'm waiting and I want to buy some chopped liver. So I'm waiting and there's a man ahead of me and he said, did you take a number? I said, no, I didn't. He says, I have an extra here. Take this number. I have a number. Gives me a number. We're talking. I said, all I need is one thing. I just buying some chopped liver. He said, I'm buying chopped liver too. Well, I'm thinking, good for you. He's sharing. So he said to me, but he said, I'm not buying the chopped liver for me. I'm buying it for my daughter. Okay. He said, because I hold by glut kosher. The chopped liver is not glut. Now we know that a lungs of an animal, when it's shechted, the lungs have to be smooth in order for it to be kosher. So by the idea of glut kosher, you're saying that, what am I eating then? I'm eating treif chopped liver? Is my chopped liver that doesn't glut kosher? If it's not glut, you're saying it's not kosher by your standards. You know, Hasidic shchita, they have places all over called Satmar Shchita in New York because they won't buy in a regular butcher shop because they have to have it shechted by their standards. So people do have higher standards, and I understand that. But what does that mean to your airline food, your meal on your plane? You just got the regular kosher? It's only wrapped twice with tinfoil. Theirs is wrapped 4 times with tinfoil, and it has a sign on it that says glut. That means your meal is not kosher. Well, according to them, it's not kosher enough. I don't like that. I think you're being outside the community. I think something should be considered either it's kosher or it's not kosher. There was a time when OU, the Orthodox Union, puskined that are you ready for this? You have to sit down for this one. I hope you're all sitting. Gelatin that was taken from chazer, which was reproduced into something else, or from beef, it was completely changed. It wasn't even resembling gelatin, was used to make candies that were considered kosher. So how is that possible? Because we relate to the idea of the woman in the Gemara that took the skin from the face of the donkey, and it's not considered to be meat. It's garbage. You wouldn't normally eat that. So if I took gelatin, a piece of tissue from a pig, and we made gelatin out of it, and I put it through a machine, and I make it, and blah, 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 and do all the processing that happens to all of this thing. It's no longer representing what it was originally, just as the chair leg is not a tree anymore, it's a chair leg. It becomes a new item. Once it's a new item and it doesn't represent what it was, it can be used in a kosher product. The community didn't like it. I think the Hungarian community, the Frum community didn't like it. So OU went along with that and said, if the community is not going to do it, we're going to remove the hechsher. The hechsher came off and they don't do it. There is a company called KOJ that has a hechsher that uses those bovine, not, is bovine cow or pig? Pig, cow. So
Cow.
Bovine
is cow.
all right. So OU puskined that bovine gelatin was to be used in kosher products. It's completely kosher because it's the gelatin. So if you're eating a marshmallow that has bovine gelatin in it, there would be an opinion that says it can be allowed because the gelatin has been changed into a davar chadash. The community that doesn't follow it, the Frum community today, says we don't eat that. Find the ones that are made with the fish gelatin that has a hechsher on it and eat those ones instead. So the idea is we do follow what the community says, but if everybody was eating those marshmallows and they were considered to be kosher, and you're the only one that says they're not kosher, you're going against the community. That would be considered, in a sense, being perceived as being, oh, you're better than us, right? So they're better off removing the hechsher and saying everybody's going to follow the same rule. We'll be a little bit more strict about it, and blessings upon us for being a little bit more strict. But in the fasting situation, if the fasting doesn't begin at sunset the night before, until when in the evening before the fast can you eat? Up till what time? So the Talmud teaches this. It says, the sages taught, until when may he eat and drink? Until daybreak. These are the words of Rabbi whoever said it. And he says, and the halacha is like Abai, who we followed. They only said this about being able to eat in the morning before a fast, when he didn't finish his meal. But if he did finish his meal, then he may not eat, Rava said. They only said this when he did not sleep. But if he slept, he may not eat. So it's confusing. If you didn't sleep and you didn't finish your meal, they only say that when he did not finish his meal, but if he finished it, he may not eat. So if you finished your meal at night and then you went to sleep and you woke up in the morning, technically they would say you should not eat, but that's not what we follow. So Abai and Rava agree that there's a period between when you go to bed, when you've eaten your last meal at night, and the period in the morning that they say is continuous. So it counts as part of that meal, almost like you haven't finished your meal from the night before, and now you're taking a break and you're going to continue to eat in the morning. It's an odd thinking.
Does that mean that, like, maybe you had part of your meal and then you wanted to have your dessert, you had your dessert
In a
3
sense,
hours later?
but it's not 3 hours later. Sometimes it's 8 hours late. Like if you went to bed at, you ate dinner, you go to bed at 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. So you're tired, you go to bed at 9 o'clock and you're lucky that you get to sleep, and you sleep all the way until 5 a.m. And now you get up at 5, let's say, because that's the fast starts, let's say at, I don't know, 5:40 or whatever it is, and you eat. Yeah, they could say it's part of that, but there was a debate on this of what constitutes this hesech hada'at. So according to Abai, one who concludes the evening meal, one may no longer eat. So if you've done what Ruth said, which is you didn't conclude the meal, you're not considering it concluding it. He said that if you finish the meal, you finish that meal begamre and you've eaten, that's it, you're done. You shouldn't eat anymore in the morning. But according to Rava, only after one falls asleep is he prohibited from eating again. Well, we fall asleep. I hope we do. I don't want to stay up from not go to bed, eat dinner, stay up all night. Well, Tisha B'Av, you're supposed to do that, right? You stay up now all night. Don't fall asleep so that you can eat in the morning, so that you're not going to be starving all day. I'd rather go to bed and then fast already, right? So you're not going to do that. So the halacha is in accordance with Rava. And the early poskim, the Rishonim, as we call them, they debate whether the sleep that he's referring to implies going to bed with the intent of waking up the next morning or even falling asleep before dinner. So see, they find a leniency. I'll repeat it. The Rishonim, the early rabbis, debate whether the sleep he refers to is implying going to bed with the intent of waking up the next morning, right? So when you go to bed, your intent is to wake up in the morning, God willing, right? Or even falling asleep before dinner. So some Rishonim explain it like this. They say, based on what we've learned, fundamentally the fast begins on the night before. However, since the people accepted upon themselves to be able to eat the night before, the fast begins once one no longer intends to eat. So if your intention to go to bed is to go to bed and get up after you have a nap, sleep, whatever you want to call it, and eat again, your intention plays a role. So if your intent, well, why can't I say that on Yom Kippur? I'm going to go do Kol Nidre and say, my intention is I'm going to wake up early and have breakfast. That'd be wonderful, but we can't do that. So there's an extra chumrah, an extra stringency about Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. So in the Yerushalmi Talmud, the Rosh adds this. He says that if one stipulated before going to sleep that he would wake up and eat, then he can do so. So it's in your intent. If you say, all right, it's bedtime, I got to wake up in the morning early because if I get up early, I can have breakfast before the fast starts at 5:15 in the morning. You're allowed to eat. And that's your intention. You're saying, I'm going to bed now so I can get up early so I can eat. Well, you do that, don't you? All right, it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to bed early because I have a doctor's appointment at 7 a.m. I got to get up early. You're going to bed early with the intention of getting up early to get to the doctor's appointment or whatever the appointment is. And that's the same thing with all intentions. When you think about it, you say, all right, I'm going to do this now so I have time in between or so that I can get up early and get to shul in the morning. I don't want to go to bed at 3 in the morning, stay up and watch a movie, and then have to get up at 6 so I can be at shul for 7:30. So you budget your time accordingly. And this is really common sense that the Rosh is saying. Rosh is our earliest, the Rishonim. And he's saying that if you're saying, and you're making a stipulation, I'm doing this so I can do that, then that's okay. And as well, some of the Rishonim are very makel, they're very lenient, because when you have the intention of going to bed, when you wake up in the morning, what are you more, hungry or thirsty? I'm more thirsty. I think a lot of people wake up, but not you, Esther. You're more hungry, Esther said.
No, I'm not. I'm neither. I don't.
You're
in the
not
morning, I
thirsty?
don't need- No, nothing.
You're lucky. I don't know. I wake up, I'd like to have a coffee in the morning. You don't have a coffee first thing in the morning?
No,
You
I
come
have
school
a
before
coffee and breakfast after shul.
Wow. That's discipline.
No, it's
That's
not
right.
a matter of discipline. If I needed it, I would have it. I just don't need it. That's,
Okay. So I'm always, I'm not hungry at all in the morning. I could eat or not eat. If I have it in front of me, I could eat for sure a chocolate donut, but I'm not.
put a chocolate cake in front of me. Doesn't matter
Yeah,
when it is.
the whole cake.
I'll
Esther and I
eat
were
it.
talking about it yesterday. We both said we could eat the whole chocolate cake and then some, right?
I
But
would give you a spoonful.
yeah, maybe. And then you'd regret it afterwards.
I know.
I think that what our intention is when we do one thing that leads to another mitzvah is important. Whatever that rule is, your intention for washing hands is not just to wash hands with the cup 3 times and say a bracha. Your intention by washing hands is to do the next act, which is to eat bread. You wash your hands, you say a bracha because you want to say hamotzi and eat. And the same thing happens here. You're going to bed with the intention that you're going to wake up thirsty or hungry. You have the mindset of waking up and eating. And if that's your mindset, then that's okay. And some of the rules that they made for us on Shabbat are exactly with that same mindset. If you remove something from a hot plate, but your intention is to take it and serve from it and then put it back on the hot plate on Shabbat, you're allowed to put it back to the heat because that was your intention of removing it, was to put it back. So intention is a big thing that the Rishonim give us already early on in the early halachas. So what does the Shulchan Aruch say? Because that's what we follow, right? We have to remember that we can say anything we want, but we have to look and see what the Mechaber and the Ramah say. Rabbi Yosef Karo, Rabbi what's the Ramah is Isserless, and we follow one or the other. So the Shulchan Aruch says it's very strict, but the Ramah on the Ashkenazi side, who usually is more strict on many things than the Rabbi Yosef Karo, who is the original, we consider him to be the original author of the Shulchan Aruch, and I've been through that before with you. He says that one does not need to stipulate an intention to continue for drinking, for being thirsty, just for eating. So I've spoken about the Mishnah Brura before. Now, the Mishnah Brura, a lot of people follow it. It has all of the opinions in it. So it doesn't just go through the Shulchan Aruch. It says, here's what the Rabbi Karo said, here's what Isserlis says, here's what this one says, and here's what the Shach says, and here's what the Bach says, and here's what the Shach's grandson says, and who argued with them, and here's what Rashi says. And they give you all the different opinions. And then it tells you which ones we don't generally follow so that you can make a decision accordingly. That's why I like the Aruch HaShulchan by Rabbi Michael Epstein, because he thinks a little bit outside the box. He creates some leniencies, but he also is very strict. Rabbi Eliyahu Henkin, who I spoke about before, Rabbi Yehuda Henkin is the one that wrote the response on women's, the concept of women within halacha, the things that they can do and not do and should be allowed to do, but aren't doing because the community doesn't say so. Rabbi Henkin, Eliyahu Henkin, was given his smicha by Rabbi Michael Epstein, by the Aruch HaShulchan himself, which is fascinating. I learned that about a couple months ago. I was reading a book and found that out. I never knew that. And so I think that these are Gedolim of our generation. But the Mishnah Brura says that one should preferably stipulate the intention to continue drinking even upon rising in the middle of the night. Because you might get up in the middle of the night and say, I'm thirsty, I'm dry, I'm going to have some water. But already, if it happened, b'diavad, we always use that expression, you didn't even think about it, you just did it. It's like you wake up on Shabbos morning and you every day you turn the lights on in the living room, you wake up, you turn it on, you go, oh, I shouldn't have turned it on, it was Shabbos. Too late, you already did it. It's a rabbinic thing, big deal. Go on about your day. Don't say, now I did the biggest sin in the world. No, you just continue on. You did something, so you did it. It wasn't intentionally. Intentionally is completely different than non-intentionally. So if you already did it, then one who ordinarily drinks every time when they get up can go ahead and drink. But what about this concept of brushing your teeth? I mean, when I wake up on a fast day, even if it's a fast day, I want to brush my teeth. You're not supposed to. But you don't want to walk around with a stinky breath all day because you might offend people. So you're thinking, how can I brush my teeth? So what constitutes this whole idea of eating and drinking on a tanit, on a fast day? The Talmud questions whether one who fasts has to stay away from drinking and eating, and also from any pleasure to one's palate. Now, this is different because we know about hana'ah, that hana is getting pleasure. Judaism is a funny religion. I don't know, like maybe the Catholics took the bad part from our religion because they make you feel guilty about everything. The Catholics, they're always the rosary beads, and they're always they go to the Father and they go into the booth and they say, Father, I committed a sin, and he says, go away and do 10 Hail Marys. And what, when we think about it, a lot of our guilt that we have come from things that are done non-intentionally or intentionally. And when you try and do things that you're going to gain pleasure from, isn't that what God gave us the world for? Is to earth to enjoy the fruits of the world? Take an apple, eat an apple. Well, Chava took an apple and ate an apple. It wasn't such a good idea, but I say, enjoy not only the fruits of our labor, but enjoy the fruits of God's labor. If we believe that kol bamina shamayim, things come from the heavens, and God helps the apples grow, and take an apple and eat it. And here we're saying you're not allowed to have pleasure. Well, the Torah is explicit on basar b'chalav. They say you can't mix meat and dairy. You can't put them together and have them together in a combination. You're not allowed to mix them. Well, if you're not allowed to mix them and eat them, you're also not allowed to have hana from it. I can't give it to somebody else, not even my dog. I cannot buy a cheeseburger at McDonald's, take the cheeseburger and give it to Quincy to eat. He can't have the cheeseburger because I benefit from giving the dog the cheeseburger because the dog gives me pleasure. I pat the dog says, I'm happy to see you, and wags his tail, and I gain pleasure from the dog. So I can't give him the cheeseburger. Quincy, you don't get a cheeseburger. So you're not allowed to have any pleasure. And they're saying in the Talmud that how far do we have to take the pleasure to a palate? So the Rishonim debate this, and they say that in a private fast, an individual accepts upon himself, or even in a public fast day. So there are things that you are allowed to do, and there are things you're not allowed to do. For instance, you're supposed to refrain from rinsing out your mouth on a communal fast. Now, I don't know, I read somewhere this, have you ever read this recently? Somebody said that you're supposed to brush your teeth with toothpaste and not rinse your mouth, leave the toothpaste in your mouth. Does anybody do that? I don't do it, I rinse. They say it's better, let your mouth slowly dissolve the toothpaste, because if it dissolves it, your teeth, I guess you'd have toothpaste on your teeth, but they're saying it's better because it continues to work in your mouth. You shouldn't really rinse it, you're defeating the purpose. You've used the toothpaste, you've cleaned your thing, read about it, look it up. I don't know anybody that does it, but there's a theory behind that. Well, if you were to say, I'm going to brush my teeth and not rinse my mouth, that wouldn't be your normal practice. So should you refrain from doing it? It becomes what you do in your private home is your business, but the community is being told that we're not supposed to do that. But in contradiction, if the Shulchan Aruch permits tasting on a communal fast, what does that mean? It means that you're allowed to cook on a Seret B'Tevet, because afterwards you want to eat, so you're allowed to cook. I'm making a stew. And I got to know, did I put in enough salt? It's a fast day. I can't check. I don't have a recipe book. I put in a teaspoon of salt. It's not enough. Maybe I need a tablespoon. You're allowed to taste on a fast day because it's not considered eating. I don't know if you knew that. It doesn't mean you're allowed to taste 48 times. Like, that's a lot of tasting. So in other words, you say, if I tasted 48 times, that would kind of be like lunch, right? You're not supposed to do that, but you're allowed to taste during a fast of the community because you're allowed to have that, because that's not really gaining pleasure by tasting. The pleasure is when it fills your tummy. That's hana, that's pleasure. Just tasting it, I'm not saying that you say, Marshall said I can go out and taste a McDonald's cheeseburger today. I didn't say that. I'm saying that tasting food that you're preparing for after the next day or the fast, you're allowed to do. You're allowed to do that. So if you're going to be tasting for the purpose of only tasting to see, is there enough salt or pepper in it, you're allowed to do that. There is an authority, the Trumat Hadeshin, that says you're not even allowed to do that. So you are allowed to. You're not going to do it publicly, but if you had to taste something, it wouldn't be the end of the world. So there are different opinions about whether or not you can rinse your mouth out or not rinse your mouth out. We are more strict on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur than we are on the other fasts. And Rav Avadia Yosef, who was the chief rabbi in the Israeli court in Yerushalayim, describes that any attempt to resolve this problem as to what is considered tasting, not tasting, did he taste twice? Well, first time I tasted it to see if there's enough salt. The second time I tasted it, I forgot to taste, was there pepper? The third time I tasted it, I wanted to see if I forgot when I was paying attention for the pepper, if there's garlic. Oh, I don't know, did I put in the onion powder? I can't check, you taste again. So in other words, it's considered going down the slippery slope, he says. That's not the word he uses. He uses the word dangerous traveling. It's dangerous traveling. I like that because it's something I've never heard before, dangerous traveling. So he says, don't start because you might not stop. It's like, who can eat one potato chip, right? So the Ramah is Rabbi Moshe Isserles. That's who we generally follow in our community. He adds that it's customary to be strict and not permit tasting even on the minor fast days. Even if we're allowed to, according to the Yerushalmi Talmud, that fasting is okay, it's better that we say we're going to be strict and we're not going to do it. And this is the ruling that seems to be more in line with the Trumat Hadeshin as well. But however, the Ramah in his commentary, and who's the Ramah based on? He's based on his grandfather, the Tur. The Tur was the one who wrote the first code of the Jewish law after the Talmud. And the Shulchan Aruch by Rav Yosef Karo and the commentary within that by the Ramah, because they're both in the Shulchan Aruch, are both following the Tur. Now, Rav Moshe Isserles, before he put his commentaries into the Shulchan Aruch, he wrote a sefer called Darchei Moshe. And in the Darchei Moshe, he says that the Maharil, who was a great Rav earlier on, he made mention of him and said he would wash out his mouth and then lean forward so that the water should not accidentally reach his throat. We call that rinse and spit. Brush your teeth, rinse your mouth. You're not swallowing the toothpaste in the water. You're spitting it out. They're not saying rinse and spit. They're saying politely lean forward before it reaches your throat. So apparently, if the Maharil is maintaining that even though you're not supposed to taste on the 4 fasts, you don't have to be so concerned about washing out one's mouth. It's not such a big deal. So there are people that do it and people that don't do it. The Mishnah Brura, which is all of the opinions together, writes, and in the case of the discomfort, you have a sore in your mouth. You got to rinse it with mouthwash. You have a horrible taste of garlic that's so uncomfortable, you feel uncomfortable about it. You got to brush and rinse. He says you can do it. Rinse your mouth out with water, but be very careful not to swallow any water. And this is true even on Tisha B'Av. I know you find it shocking, but they put an exclamation mark beside it. So they're saying, you'll be surprised to know that you can rinse your mouth out if you spit it out on Tisha B'Av. Most people would not say you can do that, But Rabbi Brovsky writes this as an opinion by the Maharil, according to halacha in his book. And he's brilliant when it comes to halacha. So if he says so, it's true. And similarly, the Minchat Yitzchak wrote books on halacha. And by the way, the Minchas Yitzchak is around today. You can go on YouTube and you can watch his shiurim on halacha. They're very, very strict. He permits one to clean their mouth, even with toothpaste when it's necessary. Now, if you Google the Minchas Yitzchak and you see who he is and the community from where he's from, if he says it's okay to do it, it's okay to do it. But listen, finishes off by saying, nowadays, it would seem that most people would feel great discomfort when unable to brush their teeth in the morning, and therefore you're permitted to brush your teeth or wash out your mouth on a fast day. I don't hear any of our modern community rabbis telling you that it's okay to do that. Yet, I'm telling you that there's a source and a reason that you can do that. So this concept of you can't even brush your teeth is really not true. Now, just before we finish, I'm just going to touch on one short thing because we have no time left, about the idea about it's a Seret B'Tevet, but it happened yesterday. You were busy. You had an appointment. You ran to the doctor. Then you went and got your hair cut. And then you had to pick up your son at the subway and your daughter at the airport and your brother. And you forgot everything about the fast day. You forgot about it. Now it's the 11th of Tevet. And you go, oi, yesterday was the fast day. Too late, I missed it. That doesn't happen so much at Yom Kippur because everybody's walking to shul and running to shul and you see it. But not everybody's running. You don't see, it's just like a regular day. The guy across the street takes his bag, goes to shul for a Seret B'Tevet, he comes home. You don't notice anything different. They're not walking with a suit with So Rav Avadia Yosef rules in accordance with Rambam on this, that concluding that one who completely forgot about the fast and ate normally, just as they normally would do, should still continue fasting the rest of the day. So if it happened on that day where you forgot about it and you woke up and it was yesterday, it's too late. But if it happened in that day where you all of a sudden your mind goes, oh, it's noon. I had breakfast and I had lunch. I already had lunch and I benched. But you realize now it's a fast. You should actually fast between 12 noon and the end of the day for the fast. And that counts. Why? Because it wasn't your intent not to fast. Your intention was to fast. Now, you can't do it on purpose and say, oh, I'm going to conveniently forget that it's a fast day until 12 noon after lunch at 12:01. I mean, you could. I suppose that's better than not doing nothing, but you're not supposed to do it on purpose, right? It's supposed to be a b'diavad thing. Like one who began the blessing but didn't finish it is supposed to conclude with the words lamdeni hakuche, as this constitutes a verse from the Tanakh. If you forgot, you can pick up where you left off and then continue. And there's an opinion cited in the Mishnah Berurah that instructs one who ate to make up the fast in order to attain atonement. So it's never too late to do tshuva, is the lesson that we learn from the fasting, is that you don't remember until 7 o'clock at night and the fast ends at 8:01, fast from 7 to 8:01. And you're given all of the mitzvah of fasting because it wasn't your intent not to fast and you did something. And now, just lastly, if anybody has an exemption from fasting, it's anyone who has any concept of pekuach nefesh. This goes very far because you could say if somebody's life is endangered, they're exempted from fasting. a lot of people don't use common sense and they fast when they should not be fasting. You don't do it. So we've been through this in halakha before with other ideas and concepts, but I'll just mention it like this. When it came to saving a life in the medical ethics topic, when we talked about it, we said that we went through all of the sources and we said, remember the case about the person that was going to go blind because they were having a eye situation, and the rabbi said, so what? Don't go. It's Shabbos. So you'll be blind only in your left eye. It'll be okay. You can still see out of your right eye. The wrong thing to do. It's stupid because you need your eyes to enjoy future Shabbatot, they said. That's a dumb thing to do. So if, let's say, you have a blood thinning issue and you are taking aspirin every day, your doctor says, take an aspirin every day. I'm not going to take an aspirin today because it's a fast day. Well, that's stupid, because take the aspirin, because the aspirin, A, it's not food. You're not taking it as food. B, it's no tain tam leaf gum. It tastes bad. You're not taking any medication because it tastes delicious. Nobody likes the taste of medication. So once something imparts a bad taste, you're allowed it. I'm learning right now in halacha, by the way, if a piece of pork falls into food and you consider it to have a good taste, you're not supposed to eat it, even though it's batal v'shishi. Remember we talked about if it's 1/60th? If you think it improves the flavor, even if it's less than 1/60th, you can't have it. If it detracts the flavor, you go, ugh, I don't like that. I don't want, it's awful. I'm going to throw. Then you can have it. The worse the taste is for you, the more you can eat, because that's the concept. So the concept is, at the end of the day, we learned in medical ethics together that you and me, we together, you and I, we don't know at what time, what situation we could land up because we don't take that aspirin or that medication or whatever it's supposed to do. A fingernail that's torn could get infected and cause sepsis through your whole blood system and you can die. You have to treat everything as being serious. So that means if you have to take a medication or an aspirin, and the risk is, God forbid, you could have a stroke if you don't have it. What are you going to say? I was fasting and I had a stroke? No, you eat. In fact, don't even just eat the aspirin. Eat the meal, eat the lunch, eat the breakfast, eat the dinner. And there are other ways of thinking about the community and doing tshuva other than fasting. And what are those ways? Well, we know tefillah, prayer, tzedakah, justice. Give a little tzedakah. It helps out people in the community. And what is fasting for? Two things: yourself and being part of the community. I can't think of a better way of being part of a community than giving it tzedakah. If you put $1 that's going to help somebody else, you're an active participant in the community, and you're still having an intent, and you can still say all of the prayers in the tefillah, and fasting vanishes. It goes out the window because there's a medical issue. Out the window. Even if you told me it causes lightheadedness for you when you fast, that's an excuse. It's a reason not to fast, because you could say, I don't want to get lightheaded, fall down, bang my head on the sidewalk, and end up in the hospital. Whatever the reason is, if you normally suffer from anything that would be caused by a fast, even on Yom Kippur, which is the strictest day of the year, I would say, don't do it. There are other ways of doing tshuva and atonement, and you know what they are. That ends the class. We're going to join together after Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and we'll have lots to learn. And what do you think of the concept, before we have a question, of doing a response on contemporary Jewish women's issues? We're going to have a discussion as to when we should do it. Should we do this class one night a week in an evening after dinner on a Wednesday? Should we do it in the afternoon? Should we do it in the morning? I'm flexible to whatever your schedule is, because you're the class. So you can email me and tell me what time you want to have it on what day, and we'll go with the majority, okay? But I like the idea of doing women's issues. I think it'd be beautiful. Go ahead, Adele.
We were talking about gelatin and rennet, and because it no longer looks the same, it's okay. Does it lose its fleishik status? Would you
Yeah.
buy a product and it's marked Parav?
It completely loses its fleischic status, just like the shiur I went to with Rav. The other day, I had I had a class, or my yeshiva brought in Rabbi Lau. That's the son of Rabbi Lau, but he's still a Rabbi Lau, and he's actually the chief rabbi of Israel right now. And I was sitting in a shiur with the chief rabbi of Israel. I felt very honored, but he was saying that lab-grown meats are not going to be meat. They're not going to be fleischic. The problem is going to be marit ayin. I'm going to walk into your home and Marvin's eating a cheeseburger, corned beef and cheese. It's lab grown. I don't know it's lab grown. So he said, at the beginning, till the community accepts it, there'll have to be hekers. You'll have to put a sign beside it, not a sign, but a symbol that says, look, it's from a package of this. I'll know, you'll tell me. But the point is maybe they'll make the burgers a different shape. They'll make them a triangle shape. So I'll see a triangle hamburger. I'll know right away it's a triangle with cheese. Therefore, it's a lab-grown hamburger, and you can have it, because there's going to be a game changer, because they're developing in Israel right now. That's why he brought it up. Shellfish that are going to be kosher, lab-grown shellfish. Isn't that interesting? And lab-grown meat. The question is going to become Hasidim, if they start lab growing, I don't know, pork flavored stuff, the Hasidim are going to go up in arms, because they're going to say, we don't want it, because they'll lead you to want to taste the real thing, even though it is lab grown, and it kind of will be the real thing. Secondly, marit ayin, seeing someone do something is going to be a problem for a while. Just as he said, the community did not have margarine on bread with meat originally, because we looked at it and saw it as butter. When margarine first came out, it looked like, oh, what's he doing? He's got butter on his bread and he's eating roast beef. That's not Jewish. Now the community accepts it, because if I see you eating margarine, I know you got margarine, some mustard, whatever it is. There's margarine. I'm sure it's not butter, because I know you're Jewish. You're probably eating margarine. I can assume that. The community will assume a lot of things down the road that not everybody's going to follow in every community, but we'll have to wait and see what will happen. So it is not meat, Adele. That's the truth. And that's why there are a lot of